allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the regular September meeting of the Fairfield Board of Finance. This evening, we've got a short agenda, but it could be interesting. The first item is to discuss a WPCA project funding for an East Trunk sewer line upgrade, a water treatment plant hardening project, and an Eastern Turnpike pump station upgrade. There will be no vote on that item. That's just an update. The second item is also to discuss and approve a rescheduled date for the capital planning workshop. I did get a note from Mr. Mayor and Mrs. Carpenter as to what date might work. That would be a late October date. So we'll discuss that as well, and that will be a vote to reschedule that. Item number 3 is to approve some minutes of 3 meetings, and then item number 4 is to hear, consider, and act upon a communication. And there's really nothing to act upon. Again, this is a discussion about a FEMA appeal decision that we received earlier this year, apparently, and it's just was brought to my attention last Thursday. With that in mind, any questions, comments, concerns from board members? Anybody have anything? All right. With that, we're going to bring up the first item, which is to discuss the WPCA project funding for East Trunk sewer line upgrade, water treatment plant hardening project, and the Eastern Turnpike pump station upgrade. Mr. Terry, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Brian, before you start diving into it, please tell us where each of these projects stand in terms of what has been approved to date, where they stand as relates to the town boards, kind of the level set exactly where we are. We voted some funding on a couple of these projects. I don't think the third project had come before us yet. Just remind us of
Yes.
the particulars, if you don't mind, and then we'll go from there.
That's correct. So part of your agenda, I just put together a quick spreadsheet to show the existing proposed cost.
Yep.
So the first one, the East Trunk sewer line upgrade, actually has come in front of you as part of a DECD grant.
Yep.
And basically that project has gone out, has been designed and is pending bid upon funding approval.
Okay, but what was the original cost we funded on this? Did we?
So the original cost to be funded was 2.5 million.
Right,
There
and
was
so
a
this
grant
is
for
4.75.
0.75.
Right.
And then you can see, if you look at this actual document dated August 21st, that was also distributed. It's been approved for 1.75 million.
Right, so it's already been approved for 1.75. Hey, Mr. Walsh.
Hello.
And that was the total estimated all-in cost was $1,750,000.
So the total cost prior to the design and permitting process going through, was proposed to be 2.5 million.
Got it, thank you. Okay, that's what I was trying to get to. So the original total cost was 2.5 million. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, and that's what had been approved.
That's correct. 1.75
Plus the-
million, a million plus 750 for the grant that was approved.
And you're confusing me on that. Don't we have to approve, Mr. Mayor, we had to approve the 2.5, right, exactly. So we approved the whole 2.5 with the understanding that 750,000 was coming through the grant, correct? That's where you and I aren't talking the same language. So you're asking for now, the 2.5, you're saying now the revised number is 4.651. So you're actually asking for an increase in funding of $2,051,121 on
Correct.
this.
Well, 551, so this. look at
Yeah,
that
but he's-
first- Look at that next page as I'm talking.
Yeah, but that's the wrong number.
Oh, it is,
It is. That's what I'm saying. Because we already approved,
0.5.
we approved 2.5. So you're looking for 2.1. Correct? No, that's not the right number, though.
5051.
So if you go to the 14 point for the East Trunk Sewer Line, which is right behind that main document, you can see how the approvals, the financing was
Right,
done. Yeah. Yes, correct.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm trying to say is if we've already approved 2.5, and you were to ask us to approve 2.551, we would be approving over $5 million, when this total cost looks like it's going to be $4,651,000. So the numbers don't add up.
Well, there's construction
Plus the
administration.
administrative
Construction
construction
administration is
fee.
on the right.
So the total project cost is not 465, got it, it's the
So that
5051.
one column with the
Got
total
it.
construction
I
administration.
was reading the schedule wrong.
We can get into that.
Okay. So now what we're saying is, a project that we thought was going to cost 2.5 million is double what we thought it was going to cost.
Correct.
All right. So let's go to the next one, just so that we get it correct. So that's 2.5 million. All right, the water treatment hardening project. My apologies, there's a method to my madness here. So, what's originally been approved?
Again, if you go to the 14 points,
Yep.
it lays out what the previous approvals. It's a little bit confusing just because of the grants that have been awarded and the process approvals through the timeframes, because this dates back to 2015.
Right.
But if you go to 12, it basically breaks down the current project cost, and then the grant. We got additional grant.
What do you mean if I go to 12? I'm sorry. Where
Sorry,
am I?
I'm sorry. So the water treatment plant hardening
Yep.
project, 14 points.
Yep.
Second page, number 12, under financing.
Right.
You can see the basically schedule of values there.
Right, but
Original
it doesn't
two-
total. So what's the total increase here?
The total increase is 4.3.
The top line.
Right.
4.3, but then we received another $1 million of state funding in July 2019. And then there was discussion previously back in, I believe, 2015 about how this project was going to be split between the WPCA and then town side.
Yeah, let's not get into that side. Let's just get into the total project cost right now.
So those two columns are the difference.
Right, so the total cost was originally $3 million. Now it's at 7.4 million, for an increase of 4.3 million on this
Correct.
project cost. Okay. Let's look at the next one, just so that we know. The Easton Pump Station,
So this one has not been in front of you.
okay.
So the project costs are, total is about six million 240,000. There's a grant for $1 million, and then the total project cost is 5,240,000.
Well, no, that's,
44,000.
that's not the total project cost, that's the request.
That's,
Which, again, that wouldn't be the request, because the request would have to be 6.024, correct, Mr. Mayor?
You're right. Mr. Flynn, the column that's construction administration, I understand, is a combination of owner's rep, construction management, and contingency?
that's, contingencies actually in the project cost. but
Okay,
yes.
so just the owner's rep cost.
No, that's fine, that's not what I'm asking.
I know, but I'm just explaining what it is, because it's not
Right.
explained there. But yeah, but your statement is correct, that the total request would be 6,024,000.
Right, so the total increase here is 2.5, it's 6.8 plus 6.2, it's over $13 million.
Correct.
What was the original estimate, even though we didn't approve it, what was the original estimate on the third project, the Easton Pump Station?
So when I basically started diving into all this, they were working off a number of 1.8 million, but that was based on a 2014 pro project, which was just to basically repair the existing Easton pump station. So the time frame goes in October 2018. The WPCA voted to approve additional flows from Sacred Heart from the Jewish home where they're building new dorms. So they did approve that additional flow and the flow from GE. So then in November 2018, the WPCA approved a design project for basically a new pump station and a study to look at the additional flows. And I have Wright Pierce here, and they can kind of give you the time frame on that. So basically, WPCA approved Sacred Heart's project, and then the next month they approved basically a design study to look at those additional flows. So I know there's some confusion among the WPCA at that meeting in November of 2018, because the minutes reflect a $1.8 million project, but in reality, once the Sacred Heart project was approved, that project was not a $1.8 million project anymore.
So the WPCA approved a project that they thought was going to cost $1.8 million, of which they were getting, the number I think you told me was $1 million back from Sacred Heart.
Correct.
And they agreed to do the project, and they signed documents with Sacred Heart saying they would do this?
The only thing I have is the WPCA approval at the October 2018 meeting.
Okay. But the approval was to accept the agreement with Sacred Heart.
That's correct.
Do we know whether there was any documents signed with Sacred Heart? Or-
Not that I'm aware of.
So we have no legal obligation to Sacred Heart University, correct?
If you would say that the approval of the WPCA board, but I would defer that to the town attorney, because that's basically a question of the authority of the board itself.
Mr. Mayor, can we get an answer on that, please? That's going to be germane to the
Is he still on
discussion.
vacation?
Yes.
Okay,
I got you, John.
okay.
Mr. Walsh, did you have a follow-up?
Well, I just think we need him, I know we said we wanted to see him at the next meeting. We seem to have a lot of issues to talk to the town attorney about, so he should come fully prepared to talk about this issue as well. At least I'm requesting that, Mr. Chairman.
I agree.
No,
Mr. Mottola?
I agree with that too. So, to your knowledge, there was an understanding between the WPCA and Sacred Heart that Sacred Heart would kick in $1 million on this project. But as far as you know, there's nothing official in writing or signed off documentation.
That's correct. So, I mean, I have the consultant Wright Pierce here, and they can walk you through that project if you want and discuss
Yeah, we'll
about the
probably will.
additional flows.
Sure, I just want to I'm level setting kind of the, what we've discussed, Brian, when you brought this to my attention last week. Before I go to Mr. DeWitt, I want to be very clear. Mr. Carey, who recently took over on an interim capacity for DPW, discovered a bunch of this in the last several weeks as he was going through some of the DPW files. Some of this information dates back, from what he told me, several months. So this information has been known. I don't know who knew it, but this is late-breaking news to us. And Mr. Carey, you're to be commended to reaching out and bring it to our...
I appreciate all that praise, but it was kind of a team effort to
fine.
bring that forward, especially in consultation with the WPCA board. A lot of these things have
Did
been
the
in
WPCA board know that this was out?
So it was just in the last couple weeks that we were putting together capital budgets where the numbers were, the numbers have been proofed out.
No, John,
This has all been in progress, and engineers have been in design and refining costs over that period. So, if you're working off a cost from 2014 and the scope of the project changes because of the realization on the ground that what you're building is no longer going to work for the capacity, then the numbers are going to change.
So when did the WPCA board become aware that build a project that they approved thinking it was 1.8 million had escalated to over $6 million?
So all of the documents basically that I've provided are the most recent cost estimates. So the dates are basically provided on there.
Okay, so I
But-
can't go by those dates, but you don't know whether they were given to the board at that time, right?
So, you know, no, I do not. So the soonest
so
they
it's
went to the board was when I compounded them all together about
Yeah.
three or 4 weeks ago.
Right. I'm gonna defer
Jim.
back to Mr. DeWitt real quick, and then I'll come back.
Well, two things now on this topic. From last year's, capital planning workshop, we were given a memo, August 28th, dated August 2020, August 28th, 2018, to Connie Saxel from Joseph Michelangelo that states that the East Trunk Line is approved at a cost of 2.5, the wastewater is proposed at 4.5, and the Easton Pump Station is proposed at 1.8. And I went back and looked at my records, and I don't think we've been given any other updates since that point. So that would have been as of a year ago, almost to the date.
Mr. Chair, can I ask for a clarification, just for my own edification, if nobody else's, based on what I just understood, or just heard? We get these numbers every once in a while, mostly annually with respect to the capital planning committee, which is the last time we
Yeah.
put the numbers down on a piece of paper. A couple of months ago, or a month ago or so, we started the process for the current capital planning, the currently scheduled capital plan session. And the information started flowing at that time. So my question to Mr. Carey is, with respect to the comment that these have been known for some time, and who knew them, I'd like to know the answer to that.
Yeah, so
Because nobody in town hall that I'm aware of,
So
I didn't know them.
I agree. So this, when we were putting together these documents for WPCA approval and also as the costs were refined from the engineer, for instance, the East Trunk sewer line, I think the date on there, it's in this package, let me just, it wasn't till a couple weeks ago when we were putting this all together that some of these costs were refined and given to me.
Okay, so I'm looking at documents here that say, in May of this year, we knew that the Easton Pump Station was gonna cost $5 million. I'm looking, the document here, the wastewater treatment hardening.
That wasn't until August 21st when we sat down with the contractor and discussed the project, because
Well,
that
then-
project's already been out to bid.
Well, the document here is 5/24/19. The document here, which was from the state of Connecticut, says for the wastewater treatment plant, says July 3rd.
Are you looking at this particular document from,
Yeah,
that's incorrect.
okay. What's incorrect about it?
That number of, the first item, one, we have to have that amended.
So when did these numbers, Mr. Mayor raises a fair point, but I don't know when these numbers were known. That's why I said it's not easy. I can't throw this, and I'm not trying to throw this back on the WPCA board. I'm just trying to figure out when the numbers were known.
So, the numbers have been refined several times, but it wasn't until engineers' estimates, again, most of these are estimates, other
Right.
than the hardening project, which the contractors basically held the bid for 9 months. We sat down with him on August 21st to make sure that those bid numbers were still solid. I mean, that is the project cost for that. We talked to the contractor, we were worried about tariffs with steel, considering 90% of the wall that's being built, or 80% of the wall that's being built around the WPCA is going to be steel, so we had some questions whether or not those numbers would still carry.
Right.
So, if you see,
Well, that went up by 3.1, the wastewater.
That's correct.
The water treatment hardening.
correct.
And that's from something that had already been approved. Because
And if I-
the eastern trunk and the wastewater, those were projects where we approved a budget on. The third one, to your point, that was the WPCA approved the project, or approved moving forward with Sacred Heart
so-
and that, assuming that it was gonna be 1.8 million, and it's 6 million.
So those costs were approved before you had design. I mean, before you had final, bid-ready documents. So, to say it was going to be, 1.8 or $2 million until you have the engineer basically complete the design and have it ready for permit and bid, there's no way to actually do the takeoff. So those numbers were, I would say, fluid at that point until you go back.
Fluid, they were wrong. I mean, you're saying that it's costing 3 times. Fluid is 10%. Fluid's not 3 times the estimated cost. I'm
So-
pretty sure that the WPCA board doesn't consider the 1.8 versus 6 fluid when they approve Sacred Heart coming in for $1 million. I'm just saying, it's not you. Please, I understand you're jumping into the middle of this, but that's not fluid. That's wrong.
And if
Brian,
I
have you
may,
looked at the 14-point position before when it was presented to us?
Yes.
What was the accuracy level of that was given in the 14 points?
I mean, it was, I don't have it off the top of my
Okay,
head.
it was 8.
It was 8.
8 out of 10. They're always 8 out of 10.
Right.
They're standardly 8 out of 10. I was actually surprised on one of your sheets here tonight. You've gotten a 9 out of 10.
Well, that's because
90%
it's been bid
reliable.
out.
Yeah.
I mean, until you have a solid bid
Mm-hmm.
document and even,
Right.
you look at the highest and lowest.
Thank you for that. So the 2 projects that we approved previously,
Call 'em up.
they were
Um,
8
and
out of
then-
10.
It's always 8 out of 10, every
Yeah.
project we get from the former people that were sitting in your seat now.
Go ahead, Mr. DeWitt, I
yeah,
apologize.
no, 2 of the points, on March 26th, we got an update from WPCA, and I have a note, accurate, that no additional funds are targeted for projects. So I have a feeling that on March 26th, the WPCA committee did not know about this. Again, I could have taken wrong notes. And then my last talk about the Easton Pump Station. In the documentation we were given, in point 12, it says SHU has agreed to contribute $1 million to the project. And on the sheet that you gave, thank you for the overview, because that was very helpful. There's $1 million on the grant funding, and that was, my original question was, is that the $1 million, or is there another grant that makes
No.
it? No, okay.
That's it.
That's a million.
But it does say here they agreed to it, but that's that doesn't seem to be backed up with any.
So, I mean, that's again, answer for the question for the town attorney. They put that out in approval of the board. The board says, yes, based on this, we're going to approve it.
Board gets data like we get data.
But their approvals are binding. I mean, once they give their approval, it's like the zoning board can't come back and say, you know what, we approved that, now we don't like it, we're gonna take that off the table.
Right, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's very valid.
Well, I mean, I have, in inland wetlands, I have case law that have been involved with a case where they tried to rescind an approval, and it was met with
So,
stiff resistance at the Superior Court.
well, and you're right, because Sacred Heart might have relied on that to go and start their
They-
construction
they
at the
did.
GE site.
Yeah, probably did. Because they're
Right.
building a pump house there, right? Isn't that a pump station or?
Yeah.
Am I
No, that's
thinking
what
the wrong
we're,
thing?
That's what we're talking about.
designing. Talking
Yeah,
about.
that's the whole project. Oh, the pump station, yeah, right.
So the Sacred Heart basically took that approval and has walked that through all of the town's land use approval boards and has received building permits, and they're in the process of construction.
I'm having to go
So-
back and, there it is.
But we haven't approved anything.
Well, you wouldn't approve their land use, but.
No, but I'm saying it's a $6,024,000 bill. And if the town body said, no, thank you, I mean, I don't even know if that's possible, right? But they could be spending $1 million of their own without our consent. I mean, it's on their land, they can do anything they want, but I'm saying, build a pump station.
No,
and
the
then- no.
WPCA runs the.
Oh, it's a
they-
WPCA funding, so.
Well,
so
no, I'm
you-
saying Sacred Heart's not gonna build critical infrastructure for on the town managing that sewer system.
So you bring up an interesting point, that WPCA can obligate us to something without having the funding actually in place to pay for it.
Which is kind of where I was going, yeah.
So-
And in this instance, they could have been given things such as this, which all of them say, all the current ones say 8 out of 10, and one of them, Jim's right, says 9 out of 10 on reliability.
So basically, Tom, Sacred Hearts has started doing what they're doing over there, relying on that we're gonna be improving this pump station.
Correct.
Just I would say, if you have an engineer's, qualified engineer's estimate, and you have bid documents and permitting in place, I would say it's absolutely appropriate to say that 8 out of 10 is a reasonable scale. I cannot estimate the bidding environment.
We're not talking about, by the way, we're not talking about these documents. We're saying that, you know, what Mr. Walsh's memory is, and he went back and looked, is these documents from the past, right, had said they were 8 out of 10 on reliability, and now they're off by howitzers on those ones that were approved in the past.
Again, I mean, I will say, until you have an qualified engineer's
I-
estimate,
I-
I mean, that can even be
You know
plus
what?
or minus 50%.
You know what? I don't care, because when the people filled out the documents, they knew that. So it's their responsibility when they filled out the documents, because we very specifically put that in the 14 points, to say, you know, that it's 4 out of 10 or 3 out of 10, and we have to go back and get estimates, right? That's fair. That would be valid if we said that, if they said that. It doesn't sound like they said that. They gave the same answer now that or then that we're getting now, only we're off by millions of dollars. And again, Mr. Carey, this isn't aimed at you. My apologies. We're just very frustrated by
Yeah,
this. Well, I want to go to Mr. Becker first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. You didn't do the initial ones, and you're doing them now, and I get the concept on the 8 out of 10 now versus them. I mean, I think the biggest problem, we just keep coming back to this. It happens at the BOE, it happens with the town stuff. We have the capital planning, we have all these numbers that are dropped on a sheet, and then we get these projects, one after another, that are massively larger in cost, much higher in the end. And then, to some degree, all that planning that we do is to slot in what we can and can't do. And the second that we get huge buckets of you know, funds that have to go out for these other projects, it just blows a hole in the waterfall, and it makes it sort of, to some degree, why are we doing that every single year if all the projects that are coming in are really, you know, it's just constantly getting reshuffled, not because of additional needs, but because of bad numbers. And it's not so much of you on this. I get it, you didn't do that initially, you're kind of stepping into it at this point, but as we now look towards, I think we're going to postpone that, and hopefully we can really try and double down. I think we said this at the last school, several of us brought this up at the last school project to get approved, that the cost escalators that they were using weren't enough. They knew flat out that they weren't enough.
Dave, it's even worse on this one. This has nothing to do with
this
the
is
capital
just-
planning,
yeah.
because this has to
It's
do with
just-
actual documents that were put together on the projects.
Well, I would say for the Easton Turnpike project, though, the timeline for that was basically accelerated based on the requirements of Sacred Heart.
Now, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
My question would be, because it's not clear to me anyway right now, how much, if any, of these changes in costs are changes in scope? Or if it's the same exact project that's twice as much, or is it a different project?
So,
Well, go ahead, Mr. Carey.
I could respond to that. So Eastern Turnpike, it's a completely different scope, expanded, and I can have Wright Pierce talk to that. And then the water treatment plant hardening, you know, they tried to value engineer that project, but there was certain components of that just talking to the WPCA operators, it just didn't make sense to have, you know, a non-stationary pump house in an area where you're going to have a storm and a microgrid. You know, something that would require, you know, on the ground, you know, maintenance during a storm, as opposed to something that was turnkey for a savings of, you know, $300,000. You know, so some of those things were looked at and said, you know, functionality-wise, for the long, term, this is a 50-year, project, it didn't make any sense. And one of the things on the wastewater treatment plant hardening project is that it is a flood and erosion control structure and a dam under the DEP guidelines. So we have to have a professional engineer come in and look at that, review it, and stamp those plans to certify them with the DEP. That's not something that we were going to be able to do in-house. And that project's going to require a lot of construction oversight. So we went back and we had an outstanding bid because, again, the engineer estimate for that was kind of blown apart when it went out to bid. So that's why you see that project increasing. That wasn't one that, we came here based on the engineer's estimate. They put that in front of the board. Everyone agreed that that was, a good number. Went out to bid and it came in at almost double. So, the bidding environment recently has been not very favorable to the town. So, you're starting to see some of these project creeps, and it's very hard to provide an estimate to the board when there's been no design or long-term design or bid-ready documents.
Right, so it wasn't an 8 out of 10, is what it was. Exactly.
Right.
Go ahead, Mr. DeWitt.
So, I mean, we do take that, I know I do anyway, take that scoring very seriously. If it's a 5 out of 10, okay, I get it. But I want to go on the record as saying this, and I think I've said before. The capital planning workshop is a fantastic thing we do every year, and I know it takes the finance department a lot of time and the department heads, but it's not static. And every time these numbers come up, I'm the one guy that pulls out last year's and says, here's the old number that you guys had, right? For a reason, because I want to make sure everyone's clear. We don't expect it to be static, and we expect at some point and bids go bad, I get it. But we at least want to hear, hey, guess what? That $200 million bid just went, or $2 million bid just went to $5 million. Now again, this is not a reflection of you because you're just stepping in it. I get it. But
But
I
I've
think
been
the
here
WPCA was kind of unaware of it as well.
I've been here before too under my own projects, and I will say one of the things that's a little bit problematic providing those types of costs in the capital planning workshop is that until you start getting borings in the ground, it's very hard to estimate, what things are going to cost. And a little bit of,
Guys, we're mixing apples and oranges, though, right? Because you're talking the capital planning workshop, which is totally, you're 100% right. This was actually a request for funding. These are 2 requests for fundings with 14 point. I don't give a damn about the capital planning workshop when you're coming to a request for funding and saying 8 out of 10 were solid on the costs, and you come back. The 2 things that we were 8 out of 10 solid on the cost, assuming that's correct, we were 100% wrong on on the Easton Turnpike cost. We're 72% wrong on the water treatment, right? And those are 2 things that we actually approved and had those documents. Now, the WPCA, they approved the Sacred Heart deal, right, thinking it was a $1.8 million project. They were off, they had wrong numbers to the tune of 240%, right? That's not the capital planning workshop. These are these documents. I don't know what the WPCA got as relates to the 1.8. I don't.
So that, again, you're correct. That has never come in front of you, that project.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I will say, the plant hardening project, that was a result of the bid environment coming back at double. That wasn't, everyone thought it was going to come back at that $3 million number, and they tried to work with the contractor to get it lower. It's just when we went back and looked at it, there was things that were being pulled out of the bid that.
And Brian, you had told me that they got that bid number many months ago.
That bid number, I believe, has been back here and discussed before as part, no.
I don't remember the actual bid number coming back.
Because that was
On the
bid.
pump house?
The
Yeah,
pumps,
on the-
no,
on the
no,
hardening.
on the WPCA hardening project.
I don't, honestly, I do not remember us hearing that they were well above the number on that.
There was a meeting when Mr. Michelangelo went through the $75 million.
But that was the original, I thought. I didn't think it
And
was
there's,
this
I
one.
don't, there's been one since the capital planning workshop.
Yeah, but
There
when
was
we
a session
approved it.
where he went through, because the board was very interested in what the funding is.
Yeah.
With respect to discussion, who's going to pay for what type thing, you guys wanted to get a feel of what the total was.
Correct.
And so I don't remember, but I can't say, so I'm just saying that was a possibility that could have been discussed then, but I don't remember.
I don't remember that ever coming up, the fact that the numbers were so much different. The rest of it, I absolutely remember.
Mr. Chairman, could you have Mr. Mayor look into when that, if we did discuss that, what
Yeah.
meeting that was at, so we could go back and watch the Fair
Please.
TV
You do that?
information on it, so we can be fully versed on what was presented to us?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mrs. Esmond.
Thank you. So from my understanding, the three areas of the greatest percentage of inflation would be materials, scope of the project, and project management.
Correct.
And what the contingency for each of these projects?
It's between 12 and 20%, depending.
The 10 is sort of a minimum, right, for something of this size?
10, I'm sorry, 10%.
Right, a minimum, usually.
It's on the sheet.
Yeah, so the cost breakdown had been provided as part of the 14 points. And again, those are either engineers' estimates, that the most recent engineers' estimates, or the bid, going back to the actual bid.
Thank you.
There's another, in addition to what Ms. Zesma says, another reason why things can completely go out of control is that the people who are in charge of putting together the bidding in DPW were completely irresponsible in putting that number together and just pulled it out of thin air, and now we're having to deal with real numbers.
I don't know how the bid.
Okay. Can I ask
What?
Mr. Carey a question?
Yes.
And I'm sorry to back you up, Ryan. I know you're just, as everyone says, you're walking into this nightmare. But when you had to jump in and started going through stuff, did you have full access to Mr. Michelangelo's emails? Did you get to look back on where this stood? Did you get to look at all the records in the file?
No.
Okay, so you don't know where any of this stuff, where he got his numbers from, how they veered off track?
No, I went straight to the source. We have engineers working on the projects. Dennis has been working on the pump station.
Okay.
You know, Cardinal's been working on the East Trunk sewer line, and the water treatment plant has been, you know, we have a bid, so we went, and Ty and Bond is
Okay,
another.
in any of your discussions with any of those engineers, did they ever tell you that they had given Mr. Michelangelo or anybody in DPW increased numbers earlier than when you had seen them?
I mean, I have, you know, I provided the documents with the most recent engineer's estimates, the most up-to-date, so.
So we have no idea, just when you got those estimates, the most recent estimates, there was nobody in the town who knew that these numbers might have been greater earlier.
I think we were all scrambling to figure that out, but put it together as quickly as possible after we met with the WPCA board.
Clearly, the
Mr.
CFO didn't know.
Bateson is here. Yeah, please come on up,
Why
Mr.
would you, though?
Bateson. You're ex officio, Selectman Bateson, you're ex officio and on the WPCA board. So
Yeah,
go
thank
ahead.
you. I don't mean to interrupt. Thanks. I attended the WPCA meeting last week, and one of the things I noticed from the engineer's presentation was they kept referring to May. What we were given at the WPCA has numbers in there from May.
Of this year?
Yeah. I don't know if it's in your packet. And this has to do with the Easton Pump Station. And that, to me, that's when I lost my temper at this meeting, for the simple fact that there were numbers out there in May. The problem is they didn't make it to the WPCA. They didn't make it to us, the decision makers. So,
Where did they make it?
I don't know. I got a document from Wright Pierce, and I kept hearing the engineers refer to your numbers in May, and I'm just like, so in other words, this was sitting in somebody's drawer since May. That's the assumption I have to.
Mr. Mayor, when did you become aware?
Well, no, Mr. Bason's correct. The one date that we know there was something available, assuming the document is correct, is that pump station, which has the date on the engineering report of May 7th.
Right.
So that's the date we know.
So when you asked earlier, you actually knew that on May 7th, we had gotten some information?
No, I read I've gone flip through. I found it after because I went through all the documents just now. But basically, and I started to bring that up, so that's the one date in here that I could find that there was definitely something known. And we started capital planning work in like May, June, I guess. So I don't know, but we don't have the initial number. The numbers haven't been submitted yet, obviously.
Right, I just want to, just,
But I
to
don't.
me, that led me to, even if there were numbers attached or not, there's a systemic failure there
Yeah.
of grave magnitude, because we're talking millions of dollars, and I know, Brian, thanks for everything. I know you jumped in at this at the last minute, and to all you guys. But I was very upset that this didn't even make it to the WPCA board. I mean, they were shocked. I mean, it was, I think they had a special meeting 2 weeks ago to deal with this. And I walked into this meeting blind, and it just, the gravity of these numbers, to not have these numbers known, that's bad stuff. And also, too, to Brian's point, we started to get the gun put to our head at the WPCA meeting that Sacred Heart is building under the assumption that they're hooking into a pump station, that the cost is going up 300%.
Right.
What are we supposed to do?
Quick question on that, too, just to run this out a little bit further. What's the total cost that you have for the total replacement of everything that we've been talking about down at the WPCA? Didn't you guys, wasn't there an estimate that was put before
The current
us?
estimate with these numbers, this is top of mind a little bit,
I
but
understand.
close, is total 84 mil with about 10 mil in grants, I think.
Right, so $84 million, right? We've been off by 172 and 240.
Don't go there.
Well, that's my concern.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah.
Right?
And
Is
and
if-
thi- yeah,
if
no, and
it's the
this
same
one,
methodology, and you're off by 100% here.
and I think there's no question with respect to the Eastern Trunk Station that if you knew this in May, you'd want to make Sacred Heart involved, you want to make the administration informed, you'd want to start dealing with it at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Mr. Mottola, and then I'll go to
WPCA to
Mrs.
know.
Leclerc.
So Brian, when you
Definitely
were,
want WPCA to know, yeah.
when you were looking at this, are there files in the DPW department, a file that says East Trunk Sewer Line Upgrade and Water Treatment Plant Hardening Project and things of that nature?
I mean, there's boxes of
There's
documents,
boxes?
but it's draft and redraft and
Right.
memo to the file and redraft. Basically, it was easy, you know, I don't know what was going on
Yeah,
before, so I don't want to.
I understand,
From
yeah.
when I found out that the issues involved in talking to the WPCA and some of the staff and the timing of these projects when I was coming up to speed, the easiest thing to do is call the people who are working for us and just get the numbers. You know, it was produced in minutes, you know, by the time you call them and put together the schedule of values, you know. So all of these projects have been, you know, they've been out there, other than the Eastern Trunk, you know, that's been out there since 2014, but, you know, for whatever reason, it wasn't discussed that, you know, in 2014, it was a pump station refurb, and once we approved Sacred Heart, you know, the flows, there's actually two projects that are approved. There's one for Sacred Heart, there was another one for an apartment building that has since been withdrawn from the land use boards, but that had additional flow capacity in
So
there.
Brian, it sounds like, and I'm not, I want to be careful the way I say this. I have no other way to say this than, I want to make sure I'm not saying it, that I meant they were intentionally. That's not what I'm saying, but it sounds like the WPCA board was misled as to what that project was and what having Sacred Heart become part of that project did to that project and to cost estimates.
So one of the things I don't know, I've gone and read the minutes, I don't know exactly, but, you know, they voted in October of 2018. The following month, they had a proposal from Wright Pierce talking about, you know, a feasibility proposal and design and bid process. So I don't know what was discussed there. But to say,
Mr. Bates, and I don't want to put you were there, though? Were you there during those?
I can't recall, probably.
Yeah.
But to say I have to say, you know, to put that on the timeline to say, okay, you guys just approved, and again, I don't know. You guys just approved a project for Sacred Heart. Here's a new proposal for $200,000 for a construction project, you know, which is going to be to handle the flow for Sacred Heart, which includes, you know, a new pump station and possibly, you know, and a forced sewer main. I don't know why it was being relayed that it was a $1.8 million project at that point.
Right.
Because we had already, the design, and I'll let Dennis from Wright Pierce talk to that, but the design for the pump station refurbishment in 2014 was already kind of in the works. So that was the $1.8 million project. As soon as they approved Sacred Heart, that just gets rid of the scope of that.
Yeah, but I
singular
can't
pump station.
imagine that they would do that, understanding that was the implication. I mean, they just essentially inadvertently bound the town to a $6 million expense.
Let me just back that up. To an expense not really understood because the design was not.
Agreed. I'm just cutting to the chase.
Yeah.
They made a decision in October 2018 that is going to cost the town $6 million if we fulfill what you believe may be an obligation to Sacred Heart, right? Because Sacred Heart take that on good faith and started building, right?
Yeah, sorry. I know for a fact that when the WPCA approved this pump station, it was based upon anticipated flows from Sacred Heart Development.
Right.
So there was, I'm not going to call it hard data, but projected data of what their usage was going to be, what their impact was going to be.
And that was all baked into this estimate?
It
of
was.
1.8 million.
Now, now, if we're going to split hairs and say that the engineering that was before us was not capable of handling those flows, then that's a systemic failure that the people in engineering should have been saying, you're not using the right stuff. You're not using the right equipment to do this. That 1.8 is the wrong number, but we were nowhere, I was not led to believe that.
Well,
ahead.
Dennis from Wright here, Pierce is here, so we can.
Thanks. Yeah, go right ahead.
Might as well say a few words here. I'm just going to, Dennis Divert from Wright Pierce.
Can you give us the history, like take us back? Like,
Yeah, I'm just
do
going
you-
to start.
Yeah.
I've been involved in this from the beginning, so I'm just going to tell you.
So it's your fault.
That's okay. It usually is. It usually is. So in 2014, we were approached by the WPCA to evaluate the Easton Turnpike pump station, which at the time GE was still in business and they were still sending wastewater to that pump station.
Just to clarify, they're still in business today. But
I'm sorry, they were still they were still occupying the facility in Fairfield.
Your stockholders wouldn't
Thank
agree.
you. So we looked at the pump station and we said, okay, we're going to reuse the building, we're going to reuse the underground structures, and we're going to replace the pumps and the electrical infrastructure, and we're going to do a little bit of painting and a new roof, some new doors. And at the time, the flow from that station is conveyed up Easton Turnpike about 2,400 feet. There was a failure on the line, I believe in the 80s, maybe once again in the 90s. So we were going to replace that force main up the road, 2,400 feet. And the estimate of that project was 1.7 million, I believe. So I can only speculate how that number got carried through, but I can't say for sure. So that was in 2014. Then, towards the end of 2018, maybe September, October, we were approached again by the WPCA. And when I say WPCA, I mean my main point of contact was Joe.
Right.
All my dealings were with Joe. So at that time, we said Sacred Heart has purchased the G property. They're going to do this, that, and the other thing. These are the flows that they gave us, so we need to reevaluate that pump station. So that's where the $199,000 proposal was approved by the WPCA in October. At that time, we had not done any design. We had not done any survey. We had not done any borings in the ground to see where the rock was. So, and then in April or May is the report that's attached to your packet. That is the basis of design that we developed when we said, okay, this is what you have to do for such and such a reason, and it's going to cost $5 or $6 million at the time. So that's my involvement. Those are
Okay.
the facts that I know. I mean, I don't know, does anyone have any questions?
No, they're pretty similar to what Mr. Carey
Yeah.
said. I mean, there's not,
We should have been,
Yeah.
we had our capital planning meeting last September 2018, so at that meeting, we should have been told that the scope of this project is going to change, because if you're saying 2018, September, October 2018, that's when Joe approached you. there was-
and that's where Mr. Bateson was saying that they didn't know that it was going to have an impact based on what you had heard.
And also, too, go back to Mr. Carey's thing about, Sacred Heart has pursued this through all the land use agencies under our commitment to do this under a number that was wrong.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot more here.
Materially wrong.
Right.
When was the first, did you ever go back and tell our guys, this number's going to be a much higher number? Was that ever communicated other than in April, May?
No. No, not
Is that because you didn't realize that we're relying on the 1.8 at that time?
I did not know anyone was relying on the 1.8.
Right. So part of the there's a systemic failure, to use your term, in that regard, right? But there's also kind of I don't know whether you call it a process failure or whatever, that we had a town commission agree to something that bound the town to a $6 million expense that likely they did not know they were binding the town to when they did it,
Fair assessment.
you know? Yeah, Mrs. Leclerc, please.
Could you clarify that? How do they require the town then to be legally responsible to expand this based on the approvals?
They relied on it and are building the dorm, and now we're telling them they can't flush the toilets if they can't tie in,
Well,
right?
Well-
if they start, well, it's our problem if the capacity is overrun, and then we start having bypasses, we'll have, the EPA and DEP down here issuing us orders, so,
But
Sounds like they're setting up house here anyway, so.
what'd you say?
It sounds like they're about to set up house here anyway, so.
aren't they expanding their usage, so shouldn't they have to contribute towards that? Are we required to put in sewers for them?
They pay a fee to connect to the sewers, and that's all scheduled out in the value of their connection fee. So
Right, but
So
this
they'll
is
pay
much more than
fees.
that.
they'll
yeah.
pay a sewage fee.
Correct.
So the universities pay,
Right, so their usage bill will
so
go up.
Fairfield U is our biggest rate payer in town.
Right.
Right, and also, too, they're going to pay an
I&I
I&I
fee.
fee.
But that doesn't mean they're paying for the
800?
capital improvement.
Yeah,
They're
and also,
paying usage
yeah, they're going to
fees.
pay an I&I abatement fee of $800,000 to the town, which is basically, they're buying capacity at the WPCA,
Right,
is what they're doing.
right.
But say this was like a new development and you had a developer coming in, wouldn't they have to put in their own sewers if we didn't have them?
Only on a road until we accept the road as a town road, and then it's basically for the town to manage forever, in perpetuity.
So isn't this
Yeah, they'd have to buy, so then the ratepayers on the street would have to be buying capacity. So if you're building a subdivision.
It's not the price of us being up on the Sacred Heart property. Sacred Heart came to us and basically said, you've got this trunk going by and
Yeah.
this pump station. We want to tie into that. We'll give you $1 million to tie into it towards the cost of upgrading it or whatever. And they said, and we said, yes. You're shaking your head, no. I had one guy going like
No,
this, and the other guy
no,
going like
that's
this.
not exactly right. You're exactly, they're tying in for the 800,000. That's while they're buying the capacity.
So it's 800.
Yes.
And what's a million?
And then the million was towards the construction of the pump station.
Right, so they said, we'll kick in another
Yeah,
million.
so they're in it for
They wanted-
1.8,
And
Right.
part of that was expediting the project.
Right,
which, by the way, is very generous.
So,
right.
so
Yeah,
the,
but
the
I don't know if
only
you were here,
thing,
Ed, but we heard that there's no agreement from Sacred Heart.
Well, there's no contract.
No
but
contract,
there's the
sorry.
appro-
It's-
There's
it's-
the
it's-
acceptance
yeah.
by the
It's a,
WPCA.
It's a gentleman's
Constantine
agreement
or-
at this point. You are correct.
so the connection from the
about
dorms
2 million?
itself into the road is constructed by their private contractor. It's,
Right.
we allow them to tie into the sewer main in the road.
Seems like we have a lot of these gentlemen agreements recently.
Are they
Okay.
going right to the pump station?
Do we have an RFP?
So, question if I may?
Yeah.
Kind of, so if Sacred Heart came to us and said, we're building a dorm, and we want to tie in, and we're going to pay our I&I fee, which I think are too low, but that's another issue. But say, and we're going to, so we're going to pay an I&I fee, what would the town do? Could the town say no?
Yes, yeah.
Town say, no, you can't, you can't build your dorm?
Can't handle the flow. Yeah.
They'd have to do a flow study. And if the flow study proved that they could tie in and we could handle the flow, they'd be allowed to tie in. If we couldn't handle the flow, they would not be able to tie in.
So it's-
Basically, what would end up happening, I'm assuming, is they would come to us and say, how much do we have to pay to help upgrade so you can handle the flow?
Yes, I believe
I mean, I'm just, hypothetically, that's
yeah.
what they're
And
going
they
to do.
came to the town and they came to several meetings.
Right.
Their scope changed several times. And then they knew we were upgrading that pump station.
Right.
Now it's from a refurbishment, it's gone to a replacement.
Right.
So if their scope has changed and our project costs have changed because of that, can't we go back to them and say, it's costing us X more because of your changes? And can you contribute more towards this project?
We're looking into that.
And remember what he just said, we decided to go from a refurbishment to a replacement, correct?
Well, because of their
Based
scope
on Sacred Heart
changes.
tying in.
Based on, so we could have, if they didn't tie in, we still could have just done a refurbishment. Okay,
The extension of the sewer system is a great limiter of development in the town.
sure. Okay,
Extension of, is that the end of the
Dennis?
system?
That is the end
I
of
mean,
the
that's as far, I mean, that's got to be the furthest
So-
point from Rod Highway,
Pretty
right?
close.
Kinda. No, not kinda, kind of exactly, right?
Yeah, it's right on the line, Easton Town.
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's our pump.
Dennis, I'm sorry, I don't know your last name, so I'm just going to call you Dennis. You can call me Jim. And the question I
It'd be
have...
probably the nicest thing he's been called.
Thanks, Dennis.
As you were building, you said sometime after October period of time in 2018 going forward and doing your boring studies and whatever, were you having conversations with anybody in DPW about where this was going, what costs were, emails back and forth, things like that, before you came up with your final report?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we visited several, Bill and his staff, we went and visited different pump stations in Greenwich and different towns in the area to look at different features of the station, but nothing was ever discussed on cost. There was never any, because we hadn't prepared a cost until we knew the details of the features of the station.
It goes back to the original comment of you didn't realize the $1.8 million that WPCA thought they were signing up for when they agreed to lay Sacred Heart tie-in.
So the first time the town heard from your company about what the proposed estimate for the cost would be that document that's dated in May. Ever. That this first time they ever heard that estimate out of you guys. From
Yes.
October till May was that May document.
Yes, and I believe the WPCA made it very clear the other night that the first time they heard it was this week.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought we were
So
pretty close.
after you heard about it in May, did you have conversations with anybody from DPW about that document? About why the number's so high, about, are there ways to engineer it down to reduce that cost?
We did engineer it down, actually, and we did reduce the cost.
When did you do that?
It was actually at 7 million.
Okay. When was the $7 million number made known to the town?
I believe it's part of that same document. Can I look at it, if you don't mind?
Well, you had to let it known before that, right? If then you engineered it down, no?
No, so,
Yeah, is that the 6.8 million number you're talking about?
yes.
Yeah, I see it in here in the May 24th document.
Yes, so the May 24th document evaluated two alternatives. It evaluated a Cadillac pump station, if you will, versus a,
Yeah, this is the
Chevy.
one with the dual
Yeah.
force mains?
correct. And then at that time, it was decided that it was too much, this was a discussion with Bill and Joe, it was too much money to go with the Cadillac version, so that was scaled down to the Chevy, as you say.
Okay.
6.8 to whatever the number is there, 5,
Okay, so going through the project, you were asked to prepare two numbers. One, this Cadillac, and one, this, what you keep calling a Chevy.
yes.
You were asked to bifurcate your number and give us two proposals,
It was presented as two alternatives.
two alternatives.
And the report recommended the lesser cost alternative.
Okay, and why was that?
Because this.
Because you didn't know that we had a number, so you didn't really care what the number was.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
The station, for the station of that size and for the waste it handles, it was not necessary to build the larger version of the station.
The larger version of the station would have done what for us?
Just cost more money.
Just, so, okay. Okay, so like made with marble or something? I mean, what are we talking about?
It would have
I
handled
mean-
more flow, right?
I mean, wouldn't have handled, I presume it would have handled more flow. I would at least hope that.
No.
No,
No.
it's a difference between a type of system. You have a dry pit pumping system where the pumps are out of the elements. You can work on them more easily. You know, we were asked, if you built a pump station, what would you want? So we told Ray Pearson Dennis what we wanted. He went back. He designed that pump station. He said, we can do a submersible one where the pumps are actually down in the sewage in its own wet well, instead of a separate pumping side of the station where you have a dry pit and a wet pit. This all would be in one wet pit with the pumps. It's not necessarily one's any better than the other. It's one's maybe more easily worked on, down the road, less corrosion, things of that nature. So we looked at the first alternate, number one, say the Cadillac. That came in at a price that we weren't prepared to look at. So then we told Dennis to go back and look at the second aspect, which was the submersible pump station, which is where we are now.
And did you think that was an affordable option at that point in time?
I think that's the affordable option that we need now.
Okay. But did you know the number was 1.8 at the time?
Did I know the number was one? I
That
knew the
we were,
number.
that we were kind of carrying on our books, that the WPCA.
I knew the number
about.
was 1.8 in the 2014 proposal.
Okay. And did you know it when the numbers came in? When the numbers came in June, or May, did you know we were still at 1.8?
I knew that the numbers that you had on the books were still 1.8.
Okay.
We were still looking at engineering a station,
Okay.
a functionable station for as equitable as we could.
Okay. And then why that was not taken to the WPCA?
Not at that time. We were
Okay.
still looking at the numbers, trying to get them as equitable as possible.
You were trying to value engineer it down from that?
Correct.
Okay. And were you able to?
No.
No. Okay. How long did that take to try to value engineer that down?
I would like to say from that time in May till, we told till the WPCA till now.
Well, that's a long time to come up with zero, that it couldn't be reduced at all. I mean, was there a lot of work for you guys to do on that, to come back and say, we can't reduce it by a penny?
We began the design based on that number. Listen, I can't speak for what Joe did or didn't do. I've known Joe since I was 10 years old, and I trust him. I thought that everyone knew what they needed to know, and, you know, I can't say why the WPCA didn't know about it. I mean, normally when I submit a report, whether it be to Fairfield or Norwalk or Stamford or Torrington or New Haven, the WPCA is provided with the report. They review it. I go to a meeting, present the report, answer any questions, and that's it. Everybody knows everything. And it was a surprise to me that this week when I went to the meeting, nobody knew about the $6 million. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't think any of us know what happened or why.
Can I just follow up on one thing you just said, just because
Sure.
we're in a, how have you known Joe since you were 10
He
years
worked
old?
with my father
Okay.
in Cheshire.
In Cheshire.
Yes.
Okay. Please forgive this. This isn't meant towards
Sure,
you,
sure.
nor towards Michelangelo. You went through the appropriate bid process in order to be hired.
Oh, yes, we were selected through the QBS process to get Clean Water Fund money to do the evaluation of the treatment plant.
Okay, so, Mr. Carey,
It was all approved by WPCA and purchasing, purchase orders issued, and
my apologies, I wasn't trying to, I just could not let that comment go without
that is
given the
not,
current
that is
climate.
not an issue.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And thank you for the honesty as well. And I grew up in Wolcott, so not too far from Cheshire.
So I guess that brings me to the question, did you do re-engineering between May and last week when you?
No, we engineered what was recommended in the May report. I mean, all along throughout the process, we look at ways to save money. Do you want a concrete walls? Do you want brick walls? Do you want wood walls? Do you want a metal shell? You know, all these little things save a couple of $1,000s here, a couple of $1,000s there, but to build a pump station to last for 30 to 50 years, it's got to be solid. And, you know, all of these different things that we were, and not to mention the fact that there's a lot of rock out that way. We have a lot of hammering to do, a lot of rock removal. We have a lot of police. We probably have there's $250,000 in uniformed police officers to do traffic control as we're going down the road. So the pump station itself is about a $1.8 million, and then $2.5 million for the piping down the road. You got $500,000 in paving to meet the state requirements on the state highway. So there's a lot of different moving parts and pieces. We're always looking for ways to save money. We're going to do an ad alternate in the bid to provide a prepackaged building instead of a built-in-place building to try to get different ways of, you know, coming up with ways to save costs. But, I mean, the station is pretty much bare bones now, and there really isn't much that we could do to save money other than do we do vinyl siding, or do we do cedar shakes, or do we put up, you know, whatever. So, you know, it's not, there's no smoking
Just don't
gun.
do copper, that got another building committee problem.
So unfortunately, pump stations don't break down at 9 in the morning on Mondays. It's normally on, you know, Saturday at 3 in the morning. So the maintenance is a huge, emergency maintenance is a huge issue, and you know, you need to make sure that the station is easily maintained and safely maintained for the people who are doing the work. So that's why it's
Brian,
you know, paramount to get their input and then kind of reverse it down.
let's get down to brass tacks on this one project, then we'll go back and talk to the other two. You have these numbers in front of you now. You're much more confident in these numbers than previously, given that it's gone out to all these bids and designs and all that. What does the discussion with Sacred Heart look like right now? Like, what's the timing of that?
I mean, I believe that's as soon as possible. We're going to go have a discussion with them about the,
Are you scheduled to have a discussion with them?
not to my knowledge right now, no.
Okay,
But
who's in charge of putting that together, of getting that discussion with Sacred Heart?
I believe Bob and the first selectman.
Mr. Mayor, where does that stand right now, discussion with Sacred Heart about this project?
I don't have any knowledge on that.
You don't,
Right
so you
now.
don't have a knowledge of it. All right, so we've.
No, this number came up, I was at the meeting, was it last week, Ed?
Yeah.
And I think that the WPCA is having a discussion with, this gentleman in the back knows.
Come on up.
Come on up.
But
Welcome.
ASAP.
Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Devanza.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for being here. Please say hi to your wife for us as well.
I shall, thank you, Chairman.
Thanks.
Basically, I had a meeting with Mike this morning. Mike Tetro and I have been tasked to re-engage with Sacred Heart. We're gathering up basically what you're talking about right now, the chronology of what happened in October 2018, where we stand, and we're trying to come up with a strategy to present to Sacred Heart as to the price. We were working with 1.7 million, of which $1 million they were going to pay for, plus the 800 INI. They were basically going to pay for the pump. Most of the rest of the project, which hasn't come up here, is piping. We've got some constrictions in the piping that have to be addressed, and I think you heard it from Dennis as far as the costs, the big cost, the 2.5 million for laying 2,400 feet of pipe, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to figure out a strategy, Mike and I, and what we agreed to this morning was I will send a document once we have it approved and reviewed by Brian, that we're in agreement within 2 days to CFO Kenny at Sacred Heart. By the way, it was CFO, we do not have a document with Sacred Heart, a signed legal document to the best of my knowledge, but it was Sacred Heart's CFO that called the town and committed that $1 million. So it came from that direction.
Right.
So
But then we recommitted by saying, we'll take your $1 million and we'll allow you to do this.
that
Right.
we committed to have this
Right.
completed actually by summer of 2020.
Which gets my point.
Which was going to be a different point.
Right, well, the issue now is, you're going to be coming back before town boards to get funding for this. We need to know what Sacred Heart is actually willing to
Exactly.
do.
So-
So, because Brian, when do you need this, I'm sorry, Mr. Devanzo, Brian, when do you need this approved if you were to move forward?
I believe the RTM meeting in late October.
So you need to get negotiations done with Sacred Heart, get through the Board of Selectmen, get through the Board of Finance, and get through the RTM by the end of October in order to hit the schedules so that Sacred Heart can use their dorms come September from a sewer standpoint. That's-
So, yes.
And actually, there's one more commission that it has to get through in September, and that would be the WPCA with
Right.
all these new numbers. We haven't approved it based on these numbers.
Thank you.
That's the first commission
Right.
that's got to get through before it
Right.
gets to this.
Right.
So, that's what I wanted to say too, that this is all, none of this has been ultimately approved by WPCA. So I just
Right.
wanted to get it in front of this board and all the rest of the board so that they know, basically what's happening and that we're moving this forward.
Thank you.
And if I could just say one more
Please.
thing, it was committed for summer of 2020.
You have to get a microphone, sorry.
I'm sorry, if I could say one more thing, it was committed to be in place for the dorms opening in fall of 2020. I think we need to discuss with Wright Pierce, based on the delay so far, and I know the state will probably not allow us to dig in the streets in October and beyond for the winter.
There's a
So-
delay already?
This was approved by the WPCA, even with the bad number, in October 2018. So it's taken... Sorry?
For design.
For design, yes. So it's, if you look at, it's quite a tight timetable. I just wanted to bring that up to your board.
Why is the time frame so tight then?
I think you're misunderstanding what he meant by delay. You can't work on a state road between December and April. I think that's what you were referring to. So the plan that we discussed at the last WPCA meeting was to bid this, advertise this in November, award it in December, give the contractor January, February to get all his schedule together and his materials ordered, and then start digging in the ground in March/April-ish, to have a functional station by September 1st. So Wright Pierce is continuing to proceed forward with the design while all these
So was your
discussions-
goal originally that you delivered this in May and you wanted the approval process to start in June
Oh.
so that you were already, was that the original?
I would say ideally, yes. I mean, we wanted to be in construction now, was the original schedule in that report.
So were you ever given a reason as to why it wasn't moving forward during the summer months?
No.
So,
Mrs.
so
Leclerc.
there's a winter shutdown, as you said.
Yeah,
So-
I got that.
so,
Yeah.
You know, even if this was, their bid package isn't done. So even probably unrealistic from that point.
So what is the cost to that accelerated schedule? Is that making this project much more expensive?
No, I would say no. I mean, the cost, the contractor has 9 months or plus or minus from award to startup to complete the project, which is pretty typical for a project of this size. Yeah, there's also going to be 2 separate contracts. It was decided at one of our meetings it would be beneficial to have 2 separate contracts, one for the piping, so you'd have a contractor who's familiar with underground piping, dealing with the state, dealing with the water company, and then the second contract would be just for the stationary site, building the pump station, doing concrete work and electrical and mechanical work. We felt that would be the best way to go about it. So, and originally it was, you know, by now we had anticipated that at least some of the work would have started. It doesn't mean it's not doable. We have to wait till, you know, we have the winter time to get everything in order, so that they could start in March.
That's just on the piping. We could get a contract in place and start building the pump station at any point. We would need the existing pump station to stay functional until the other one's built and tied into those pipes, though.
All right, so this is, anybody have any more questions on the pump
There's room to
station?
do both, like have the current pump station and then build a new one right next to it, so it's ready?
It has to be.
Okay.
You got to maintain
Yeah,
the current
yeah,
pump
yeah,
station.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's also the.
I just didn't know
matter-
what your rooming,
There's also a matter of, if it's important to you, it seems like you're interested in all aspects of the project, but the current pump station is currently on a leased parcel of land through Sacred Heart, and that expires in 2 years. So one of the discussions with Sacred Heart was that they would provide the town of Fairfield with an appropriately sized parcel, an easement that they would need to build the pump station. So that still needs to go through the town attorney and all that, which hasn't been done yet.
So that's just an easement, though. That's not a direct fee simple
understand.
purchase, so it shouldn't be.
Just sounds like a tight time frame. All right,
Can I ask,
Yeah,
Mr.
one
Mayor, is
more.
somebody looking into why this delay has happened for this many months? Why this hasn't been brought forward since May?
I just learned about it last week.
No, I know. Is anybody looking into it? I mean, is somebody like,
Well-
while Mr. Michelangelo is,
charge?
while Mr. Michelangelo is away or on leave, is someone like checking his emails from back then to see what was going on? Like, this seems like a very large delay that you stumbled on, that everyone just stumbled on about a week ago.
Well,
Maybe Brian knew about it a little more, tried to get some numbers together and stuff like that, because you were.
No, I mean, I
me answer.
mean,
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question because what we're trying to do, the town is doing without 2 people who were key personnel in charge of lots of activities. And what we're trying to do now is just get a handle on all those activities and make sure that we do them the best we can. Obviously, one of those gentlemen is no longer working for the town. The other gentleman will, probably go through some hearings. and
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot
but I
of this will
guess-
come out at that time.
How do we know what process, and Bob, this might be unfair to you, Mr. Carey, you might be in a better position and maybe not, but what's the process you're going through to understand what you don't know? We asked you earlier, did you have access to his emails, did you, and you were like, no, no, no. So what actually do you have
So
access to?
I mean, just to go quickly, I mean, I've
Yeah.
met, I've asked all the staff, that's things are tasked out.
Yeah.
A lot of the projects have come through us from a permitting aspect, so I know, from my other role
Yeah.
of what's going on. I have my ear to the grind, ear to the rail a bit on what's going on in town and know basically what are the key issues that I need to resolve among all the other stuff that has been going on. So, in talking with, the managers in the Public Works Department and Engineering Department, I've kind of flushed all this out. I mean, this wasn't, this was brought to me by people who are in the WPCA. I didn't just stumble across this, but when I looked at it immediately, got my attention because this is a problem with the short time frame. Obviously,
Do you have
cost.
anything else?
From right now, no. I mean, paving was an issue. I got my hands around that. It took a little bit of time. Tilcon left. We had to straighten some things out just to understand the process, meet
Who
with
left?
the gas
I'm
company.
sorry.
Tilcon left town when everything came out. I've had to reschedule them and get them back going and understand the budget. That's time critical. That's back up and going.
What's that one? Can you explain that? What do you mean they left town?
It's just paving. No, I mean, I'm just saying, I had invoices from the last year that I had to straighten out to understand the budget. It was being managed very closely, but I'm not my predecessor. I don't know. I mean,
Right.
even if I went out of my office tomorrow, I try to leave things in a manner where the next person can come in and run with it, but
Right.
some people are very organized and
But what's that Telcon left town? What's that?
Tilcon basically was paving roads, and we had them on a schedule to pave roads. When we had this little hiccup, they basically went out of town for a couple weeks, and if you can see Duck Farm and Brookside Drive were not paved as soon as the cold-in-place recycling was done.
And
So
what was the rationale for that?
they didn't have anyone kind of managing things, so I had
So
to
they
go
didn't
meet-
have a go-forward schedule for even a couple weeks
They
to
had
say-
some streets, but it was good to have a little breathing room to kind of get
Got
my
it.
hands around it. Now I have my hands around it. I know what the budget is looking forward, and
Got it.
basically that's all squared
Okay.
away. That's what I'm saying is that, so I've been running from one kind of
Fire.
It's not a fire. It's just that
Smolder.
I'm coming into it and have to understand it myself before I feel comfortable moving forward with these larger capital type of projects.
Right.
So, this was brought up, this whole budget issue was brought up to me by people who are in the WPCA, and when we looked at it, the numbers and the estimates were not jiving with what has been presented. So,
So there were other people, when you say people within the WPCA, you're not talking the committee, you're talking staff at WPCA.
Staff, yes.
And they came up and said, hey, by the way,
also-
look at this, and this.
Yes, and also, members of the WPCA who were, becoming aware of the information, because obviously September is a critical time with the WPCA, not only with capital project planning, but also with setting rates and things like that. So there's a lot of moving parts.
Got it. Okay. So the pump station, any other questions on that? Let's get to these other two.
Well,
Yeah.
and I don't want this to turn into a 2 hour, but you did talk about setting rates, and we've asked here multiple times, how are you guys going to set rates? This is a $4 million news item. What, is that going to affect the current rates, or is this going to be next year's rates, or? I mean, I know that's for the commission, right? And I know you probably can't speak on behalf of the whole commission, but.
Yeah, I mean,
We have a vice chairman here.
somebody's gotta
I
pay for it.
can address
Well,
this
Mr.
a little
Devanzo can
bit.
come up as well. I mean, come on up.
I mean, we've been asking for the better, not a
Yeah, but
criticism,
again,
but we've been.
I don't want a 2-hour discussion.
No,
on
this is very, very
We've
good.
got-
But basically, we have flow. We have our current rates. We know our current rates compared to the neighboring neighborhoods. We know what our flow is currently. We make an adjustment for next year's flow. We put together a spreadsheet with total debt, actually. Assuming when I say total debt, But what I mean is, assuming that the WCPA pays for the debt out of their rates, and we put together a 20-year schedule, and we present that. We presented the first draft of that at the meeting last week. The flow numbers are going to change a little bit. They're going to go down 4%, if I understood the schedule I got today from, and basically, so we then what we try to do is schedule the rate changes to match the debt payments.
So who's driving that process is the question. Okay.
Advice from Mr. Mayor.
But all I want to know is you're using the data that we saw tonight, not like,
Yes.
oh, you're not
Yes.
still 1.8 million on the Eastern Turnpike, right? Okay.
Fine.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the other two items.
I mean, there's other ways to do it other than debt, right?
Yeah, let's move on and we'll come back to it.
What? We have a $6 million surplus you're about to tell us about in a couple of weeks. Correct? Yes. So,
No,
I mean,
it's debt. What we use, we also use, in other words, the current,
That rate.
the current fund balance at WPCA is like, I think, close to $9 million.
Correct.
okay.
So we
You were going
also,
towards that,
we
towards-
also use that. And but basically, this last schedule I put together allows that to handle the debt payments with a certain set of rate increases, allows that fund balance to go down to about
Fund balance is taxpayers versus ratepayers.
goes down to about $2 million, and then starts,
Cities don't pay, and everybody else doesn't pay.
and then starts building back up.
Towards the payment of the $86 million.
No, that's kind of like, that's paying off the most of the $80 million.
All right, let's go to the Easton Trunk Sewer. How are we off by 100% on this one?
East Trunk Sewer Line. So prior to, we received a grant from DECD for $750,000. At that time, the application that was submitted to the DECD had an estimate of about $2.5 million. We hired Cardinal Engineering back in 2017, I believe. It was approved by the WPCA. They went out to bid. They did all the design work, permitting, and basically their project estimate came back at 4.5 plus the construction administration costs, and then you can see basically what the funding is required.
Why were we so off? Do you know? There was a lot of discussion over why we were off from the 1.8 to the 6. What happened here?
So I think at the time that this grant was written, there was an estimated project cost of $2.5 million. Then they went and to design it and found a whole host of issues with basically from shallow bedrock to crossing the intersection on the Post Road. The cost got higher based on the technical issues with the project. There's a lot of utilities and a lot of sheeting that are going to be required along Grassmere Avenue, and then the actual construction that's going to take place in the Post Road. It's just utilities on top of utilities. The 725 kV line for UI. There's rock that needs to be removed. If you look at
was there any work that was done when these estimates were put before us, when they were approved quite some time ago? I mean, have you been able to find anything that says this 2.5 number wasn't just kind of a swag?
No. I mean, I haven't, honestly, to be honest, I have not looked into it that deeply to see what the boards were, what was proposed, 2 years ago, because honestly, that's not the estimate
It's
that's in
irrelevant
front
to
of
what you're doing
It
now.
is.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to, and I appreciate that. I'm just trying to understand, Mr. Mayor.
I mean, I'll be honest too.
Yeah.
This is an estimate. This is an engineer's estimate. I'm not saying that we don't go out to bid in a environment where steel and tariffs on materials does not cause these projects to go higher.
So what you're saying is this,
I
this
mean-
isn't an 8 then?
No, this is an 8, because I think if you have a solid engineer estimate that's
It's
been
an 8
designed-
now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if I came back to you
Oh,
and
wait a
said-
minute. So are we saying, you just said, I'm sorry, I thought you were hedging your bets on the
No,
current one.
I'm saying
You're
if I
saying
have-
it's an 8 now?
Yeah,
It's
I
an 8
put-
now that is an engineering report.
Yeah, if I have an engineer who says
Fine.
yes, unless they
I-
are pie
I-
in the sky.
You don't need to,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out what the heck it was back when it was 2.5 and what kind of estimating went into that.
So
Right.
the economy's it's kind of a difficult bidding environment, because there are a lot of good contractors that are busy, but material costs are rising. So you're not necessarily going to get, we're hoping to get pre-qualified contractors and see who's available for bidding for some of these projects because of the tight timeframes.
Bob, if we approved this project back in May 2017, why are we sitting here 2.5 years later with it not done? Do we know?
It's taken a long time to design and permit. I will say I have a couple projects that the permitting process through the Army Corps has been over a year.
So shouldn't we factor in that kind of delay into our price points when we put this out there?
I mean,
I want to hear from him.
Yeah, no, actually, I remember a discussion we had last year's capital planning.
An escalator in each of
To
them.
put an escalator in, which we're doing.
But I'm not even talking about capital planning again. I'm talking about this
And-
was an
and-
approved
well,
process.
Yeah, but, I mean,
I understand, but shouldn't we put an escalator in here?
yeah, if you think something's going to happen X number of years from now, yes, you should
double
definitely
it.
put an
You should
escalator.
double it.
And one of my,
That
one
seems
one
to
of
be
the
the
things
escalator.
well, maybe, yeah. But one of the, one of the things I think I remember hearing at the WPCA meeting, there's a lot of steel going into the hardening because the ground was different than what they thought it was.
Okay, so this
And
is
well,
East
so-
Trunk Sewer. This isn't hardening, right?
No, the-
yeah, so same thing, they have to actually put in steel,
and the price of steel
heating
is,
to work in the roads because of, the
Guns sky
safety
high.
factor. They have to basically steel pile the road in order to dig the trench to put the pipe in.
So we didn't know we were going to use steel before?
No, we did, but the price of steel is going up 15% because of the tariffs.
Yeah,
So-
this is going up 100%.
If we were 10% out, we'd be okay.
yeah, well, some of, like I think in the hardening one, I think didn't think they were going to use steel.
So there was question whether or not that was going to be in
Okay, let's
Earthenburg.
stay on the East Trunk Sewer. I'm sorry, my apologies. I just want to, so there's no real, basically, you can't speak to the original 2.5 million estimate because you haven't found the files or whatever that support the original estimate.
I don't believe that was based off of a design or engineer's estimate. Believe that was based off of someone writing a grant, taking a couple, measurements and saying, yeah, I think generally this is what it would cost. How many feet of pipe and,
Wow.
which I will say, when you're writing a grant, that's absolutely appropriate to do. You don't know, you don't have, designs. You're not going to get a design and then go get a grant for design. And that's what we were going to get a grant for. So there is some type of fluidity to that again,
But don't we aim high in these numbers?
What'd
My
you say?
boss- Don't we aim high? My boss
Apparently
asked me for
not.
something for 5 years out. I add 20% on it just because. I have no idea.
I would say that is, I would say that is a philosophy among people, whether you name high or not during writing a grant. I've written-
Philosophy? Seriously? I mean, in my company, you come before me with a 200% overage on a project, you're packing your bags within an hour.
I understand. I'm talking about grant writing, though.
Well, this wasn't a grant. This was actually coming to us to approve funds. This wasn't just a grant. Yeah, Mrs. Esmond.
I just want to clarify, so the initial number, was that based on refurbishment rather than replacement? This kind of reminds me of the clubhouse where, the waterfall was,
East Trunk Sewer line, you mean?
yeah. I mean, could that be part of this variance that we were talking about?
This is a, this is a pipe relocation.
So it wasn't
It's a
going to be.
whole new pipe. It's,
Yeah.
it's
So
it's
this
being-
was never, a
No, this was
the
always
full
going to be a
replacement
pipe.
was always the
Yes.
conversation.
And this is This is, say, 2 miles of pipe at a certain depth, at a certain size pipe, and that's how you write that bid package,
Yeah.
that grant. Now, if you went for a grant package and, the grant, people who approve the grant and they see that and you overestimate it, they're gonna kick it back
You
or say the
guys said
same
it
thing.
before. You just can't cut the pipe off and say, okay, everybody, let's not flush for 2 months while I'm laying new pipe. It's got to be a replacement, right?
And this pipe that we're replacing, now this one we're replacing is in the riverbank. We're going through town roads.
Right.
So we have
Right.
all of the other utilities and the depth that we have to do, and the crossings we have to do.
Yeah, so
But it sounds like all that was known when this was presented for us the first time, like none of that's new information.
So so the technical challenges of crossing the post road, I don't believe were known to the degree they were.
Really?
Yeah, because the level of the rock, I mean, they were talking about at one point about how they were going to remove the rock, because basically once you get the road open with all the utilities in there, you can't hammer the rock. So they were talking about chemical removal, and it was a very challenging project to design that intersection.
Understand that. I can appreciate that. I just am astonished that we didn't. I thought there was a higher level of due diligence that was done before the numbers were brought before us, so that when they presented the numbers, they would have been able to say, oh, by the way, here's what we don't know, right? And when these projects came before us, I never remember them saying, we're concerned about this, this, and this as we open these roads and start working on that.
But I think that bid estimate is just what it is, says an estimate on where and how you think you're running the pipe. And then you start doing the test borings, and then you find out what you're
Are
running
you
into.
implying that the 2.5 million is based on a bid estimate? Because I don't know, right? I'm just saying,
Based on an engineering.
I don't know what it's based on, and you haven't been able to see. Tell me what it's based on.
So I will say, when I...
And I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
My
when I write a grant, though, for a specific project, I will say, based on my knowledge of this particular project, it's X, Y, Z. And then I get the grant for the design, and we go out to design, and all of a sudden the engineer says,
Yeah,
that
but Brian,
number
this isn't
is-
a grant that they were applying for. They were applying for
understand.
funding for the project. If you're going to apply for the grant and say, hey, guys, to get the grant, we use 2.5 million. However, we don't know these 5 things. We're concerned about the level of rock underneath the road. We're concerned about the utilities. So when we applied for the grant, we said 2.5. We think it could cost as high as 4.5. Right? I mean, we've actually done certain projects like that where we've put in higher contingencies because of things we didn't know. Right? I mean, and again, that's not at you, but we keep
No.
on going back to the grant application. That's different than the actual funding application.
I mean, and
with
look,
us.
until I have a bid, almost bid quality drawings and design and an engineer's estimate, my guess of cost is going to be plus or minus 50% at least.
Right. All right. Somebody had their hand up
I
over
did,
here.
but I'm okay.
You're okay. Anybody else on the East Trunk Sewer? All right, seeing none, let's go to the wastewater treatment plant hardening. This one is up 72% over the original. What did we find out here? I think you already said we didn't have factored in steel. Is that
Well, there's
part
a
of it?
couple things when we went back and talked to, this was actually a bid, so this has already been out to bid. We went back and talked to,
And when was the bid received? Is that the thing that I saw here?
I think it was over a year ago.
So the bid was actually received over a year ago.
Correct. So we've been waiting on permits for this. Army Corps permit.
So where's the bid in here? Where's?
So the bid, it's actually a proposal. I mean, it's a revised proposal. It's this document here that's dated 8/21/19.
But why would it be, I'm sorry, where is that?
It's about 3 pages in on the second document we were.
Yeah, why do I keep missing it?
That's it, right there.
This is July 3rd.
No, the page before. Up top. 8/21/19.
Okay, so we got the original bid estimates, which was done when?
I don't have the exact date that it went out to bid, but I believe it was about a year ago.
And were we over a year ago?
Yes. They were over the funding amount.
Yeah, so we knew a year ago that we were over the funding amount here. So a year ago, we knew. And Bob, this wasn't adjusted in either the waterfall or anything, even though that information was known a year ago, I guess.
Well, this would be in the WPCA waterfall. If you remember, we did waterfall.
I
we did
don't
two
care.
waterfalls.
Did you know this was
Yeah.
over a year ago?
I don't know what's in the waterfall a year ago, so I'd have to look at that.
I told you before.
Well, it's what was approved. Yeah. All right, go ahead, Mr. Carey.
So basically, we went back to the time bond engineer and also Holzner, who is the prime contractor, and asked them if the bid, was, if we could hold the bid, which they've been holding for us. And we made some adjustments based on, basically, they're trying to value engineer things. And when we looked at it as a team, some of the things that they were removing, there wasn't a lot of cost savings, and there was a lot less functionality in the final project. This is critical infrastructure. Obviously, it's probably our largest asset by fund in the town, the plant. And, we were taking pumps out of the project, basically transfer pumps out of the project, and we put stormwater pump station back in. So we were going to basically take the stormwater pump station out of the bid and then go out and buy, diesel pumps to basically perform that function. And, for a resilience measure, we're talking about saving, $300,000 or $400,000, and it just didn't make sense. We have a microgrid going in at the pump, at the WPCA. That was supposed to work in conjunction with the storm pump stations. So for the value that the town would have saved, we would have been, the functionality and long-term maintenance it didn't make much sense. And then also, there was, the prices, they were able to keep the price of steel, but you can see the adjustments in the rate schedule.
The other thing I see noted on here that I look at the detail, and I just point this out, you might already have this covered, but there is a line item here that says berm fill borrow
That's correct.
for $89,000.
So there was a cost, instead of using the material from the fill pile, to pick up a cost to actually import the fill. I'm not saying that we couldn't use the fill from the fill pile. It would just take testing, a testing program, and would have to test it in 500 tons.
So so this was in the original bid from last year, is we're
Correct.
going to go get different fill from the outside.
So that
We
they
said that last year.
So last year, we were saying we could use fill from the fill pile. And I'm looking at this and saying, I'm not using fill from
Okay.
the fill pile.
Because I see it, and it's both in the original and it's in the revised.
And-
Am I reading it wrong?
Which, are you looking at the add alternate?
Yeah, down at the bottom, I'm looking at add berm fill borrow. It's got 89,100 in the revised bid amounts, and it's got 89,100.
Yeah, so the total cost of the additional fill was about 600,000.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were.
So I'm not saying that the filled material from the pile can't be used, but it'd have to be done under strict testing protocols. It would be very slow, and the cost savings on that would be.
I'm not even suggesting it, I'm just asking. All right. What other questions on the hardening?
Just one other thing.
Please.
We were able to secure another $1 million from CDBG DR,
Good.
where they actually moved it over. But again, this project is under a tight time frame, And a lot of that goes back to the permitting process. It took about, between DEP and Army Corps, it took about 13 to 14 months to get those permits in hand.
Okay. And those, fine, and that's happening, all of these, in your opinion, based on either Sacred Heart or the outside funding, all three projects are somewhat time-sensitive.
Correct.
With the
This-
with the hardening project, there's no other project that we can do with the treatment plant. The microgrid project is probably 30%, 40%, maybe 50% complete at a standstill, because we can't move, and that's a project that's already funded.
So
Paid for
why,
it.
and to that point, and I don't know that you have the answer to that, so we're just looking at these estimates that were received essentially a year ago. Why the holdup of a year before coming back? I understand that the Army Corps of Engineers, like, I get it. I'm just saying, why are we just seeing now that those estimates?
We had to wait for the CBYG grant until they expended all their money, and then whatever else was left, they were able to give us.
No, I'm not asking about how we get the money. I'm just saying the total cost of the project, we got a bid in last year that said, hey, by the way, we're significantly over the approved amount for this project. Why weren't we alerted a year ago that we
And
were
I-
significantly over?
And I think that alludes to the fact that we were trying to get more funding, number one, and number two, we were trying to see where we could value engineer the project.
And that was a year.
Yeah, it took a very long time to get the rest of the grants. Laura
And
fully
the
worked on that for
was the
us.
WPCA board aware a year ago that this was over budget by 75% or so?
I don't believe they ever saw those numbers.
Mr. Chairman, that's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. After sitting in on this meeting last week, it caused me grave concern that these numbers were out there, and they just weren't making it anywhere. So it's problematic. It's systemic. That's why I'm here tonight, that we need to really encourage our department heads to come forward with this news earlier. That
Right.
no matter what constraints may be held on them, we don't want to issue bad news.
I
That-
want to,
Yeah.
We need our department heads to come forth, be honest, and say, look, we were wrong. The numbers, there's ledge in the road. It's going to cost more. We understand these things. We're willing to deal with them, but now I'm behind the eight ball, a gun's to my head. They're building dorms. There's all these constraints. I can't do the microgrid because we can't do the hardening project. It's just, where do you even begin to unravel this? Whereas if everyone was up front, here are the problems, let's deal with them, this would not be an issue.
I agree with you. Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, I just have a hard time understanding how anybody's supervising the Department of Public Works prior to Brian coming in. Because no one's questioning any of these numbers. No one's tracking how these deals are being done, where they stand in the process. There's just like no supervision. I mean, I'm looking
No.
back excuse me?
I
Go ahead.
mean, I don't know if I'd necessarily, there is supervision down there, but I'd also like to say, I'd want to check the WPCA minutes to see that this wasn't brought up. I mean, there was a public bid that was put out. I mean, that information is public, whether or not, I want to see if it went to the board. I don't know. I mean, the
All right.
timeframes are things I'm still trying to unravel.
All right, the vice chairman's here. Why doesn't he come up for a second? We can ask him some of these questions. Were you not getting any of this information that you needed?
On the hardening project
Yep.
specifically, we were dealing with increased costs. On June 15th of this year, at our meeting, it was presented to us, we had to approve an additional $386,000.
Okay.
Did you know that the bid came in 72% higher than what was approved a year ago?
I personally was not aware of that.
Right.
Was the board, to your knowledge, ever made aware that you weren't, like in your minutes?
Was the, I can't, I have no idea. I mean,
All right.
we've got another board member, but as far as I know, when the increased costs came in, they were presented to us for additional approval. Because again, on July 24th at our meeting the following month, we then approved an additional 1.1 million.
That's this summer, right?
That's this summer, yes.
Right, but did it go before the board last year?
I was not on the board, so
Okay,
I never was involved with the original bid
right.
of the project. And at this last meeting in August, I think we're seeing additional costs, again, for the fill. We've asked for a project manager's cost to be put on top of the project, on each one of those projects you're discussing tonight.
Right.
Because there was no project manager. And the commission felt that a project manager would help in both the communication and the management of the expenditures.
Right.
So that.
I happen to agree with you on that,
Happened to
yeah.
put that in place, but just at this August 28th meeting.
Right.
So can we just have someone look at the minutes over the last year to see if this was ever brought up? It's a pretty easy thing
Mr.
for us
Mayor,
to
can you
do.
do that? Please have somebody look at the WPCA minutes and see if this was brought up. I do have to agree with what Mr. Bateson said. It's just the communication flow here. The CFO, I don't think, was aware of it. He's putting together, helping putting together these financial models for us, these long-term projections. You know, I can appreciate the fact that, gee, we're trying to get another grant, or we're trying to value engineer, but we've got a material difference on these numbers. It'd be nice to know what the department heads and/or the commission, whichever, are dealing with. I mean, it's a lot easier to deal with something a year ago than it is now, to use Mr. Bates' analogy, with the gun to your head, saying we got to get this done or else we're going to lose our funding, or whatever. That's quite frankly, it's just unacceptable from all of us. Gee.
That's another obstacle, is these grants are only available for so long.
Right, which is why it would have been nice for last year, the capital planning
that's what
say,
I'm-
hey, guys, we got an issue, we're trying to work through it, we're looking at CBG grants, we're looking to value engineer, but right now, just so everybody's aware, we're $3 million over budget, we're trying to manage it, but we may be coming back to you. Right.
For full transparency now, that's what we're looking at, those grants that are coming up and may not be available afterwards. And also on the hardening project, our estimate for the treatment plant is 60 million. Without the hardening project, Dennis, maybe you can speak to a cost?
After this meeting, I'm hesitant to throw a number out there. It would be a lot more.
Well, quite frankly, I'm just concerned with, after this meeting, and after the last, I found out about all this on Thursday when Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Bateson on this particular item told me last week, and then Mr. Carey was kind enough to call me on Thursday and ask to get everybody on the agenda. I'm very concerned about that $84 million number. I'm throwing that right out there right now.
Yeah, so
I don't trust a damn number that's coming out right now.
So that treatment plant, the treatment plant estimate assumed that the entire site would be protected from flooding, which is the hardening project. So if that didn't happen, all the buildings would need to be raised, all the electrical infrastructure would need to be raised. So you understand the cost implications, right?
But I just don't understand the entire cost implications, because I don't know what's in that 84 million anymore.
Okay.
I just honestly don't. I don't know whether that's 120, 160, 100. I don't know. I'm not trusting a damn thing I'm hearing, because nobody can tell me what the process was. Mr. Walsh.
I will tell you, I've looked up the, on the water treatment hardening plant, the project, back in 2015, our minutes and our materials that we were sent have a 14-point analysis by Joseph Michelangelo, dated August 20th, 2015. In there, he says that the project will cost $3,088,000, of which the local share of the town of Fairfield would be $772,000. And in regard to that, the reliability of that cost estimate, he says that his reliability on that number would be his normal 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Which seemed to be a consistent reliability factor from every time I get a project from Mr. Michelangelo before us.
Thank you.
But I will thank you, Brian, for bringing that up, because I agree that if we don't have engineering numbers, it's got to at least be 50% variance.
The engineering number on this was actually around $3 or $4 million, so it was the bidding environment too. That was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mrs. Leclerc?
Brian, I know you're new in this position, but does the department have a project tracking list, something that tracks all your projects and required deadlines and grant dates and?
Yep, yes, we do.
Okay. Is that something that can be shared with our board?
Yes.
Is that-
Please. Any other? All right. Item number 2, and I'm hoping these will go faster from this point on. Discuss and approve the rescheduled date for September 17, 2019 Capital Planning Workshop. Okay, this is a holdover item from last time. As you could tell from our immediately predecessing discussion, they need more time to get better information for the Capital Planning Workshop. Mr. Mayor, you had a recommended date?
Tuesday, October 29th.
Can everybody take a look and see Tuesday, October 29th? Just check your calendars right now, please. Tuesday, October 29th. Good? Anybody have a problem?
No.
Looks good.
All right.
Come in costume, Bob?
Seeing none. Chris, I thought you always came in costume. Seeing none, I'm going to ask that we change the date of the annual capital planning workshop from September 17th, 2019 to Tuesday, October 29th, 2017. The room will TBD based on what's available. Do I have a second to my motion? We'll take Ms. Zesma in the second. Any other questions, comments, concern public? Any concerns on this item? Mr. DeWitt?
We're only moving this for 1 year, correct?
Correct. Next year, we approve, in December, we approve a calendar for next year.
Got it.
All in favor of moving this meeting? Opposed, abstentions, the meeting is moved. Mr. Mayor, if you could work with Ms. Carpenter, and get that addressed. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Item number 3 is to approve the minutes of January 8th, 2019, May 28th, 2019, and June 4th, 2019. Please just take a look and make sure that people were at those meetings. Everybody was at the January 8th meeting. I was not at the May 28th meeting, and Mr. Walsh, you weren't at that meeting. So I'm going to take these separately. First, we'll take the January 8th meeting. Anybody have any questions, comments on this agenda? Mr. DeWitt?
Just, this was the meeting, this is like the third time we've tried to approve this meeting. This is the meeting where Representative Vergara came in front of us, and Ms. Marmion and I asked for additional comments. I just want to go on record. More data than we need, thank you very much. Please approve.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns on this? Seeing none, all in favor of approving these minutes? Opposed, abstentions, those minutes are approved. The May 28th meeting, questions, comments on that meeting? Seeing none, all in favor of these minutes? Approved, abstentions, Mr. Walsh and I abstained from that. The June 4th meeting, questions, comments on the minutes on this meeting? Seeing none, all in favor on this minutes? Opposed, abstentions, those minutes carry. Okay. That item carries. We're going to go to letter received. It was in our package. This is FEMA, and this relates to Penfield Pavilion. Mr. Mayor, where's the letter in our package? This came...
It's a 30-page letter.
Right.
I think they should put 2 in the packet, one the denial and the,
Yeah, so my disappointment in this, and I want to go on record with this, is very early this year, or late last year, I can't remember the exact date, we found out many, many months after the fact that FEMA had denied the original application for reimbursement for the rebuild of Penfield Pavilion. At that time, we had requested that when something like this happened, we be informed immediately and not several months after the fact. In fact, right now, We have a letter before us that's dated June 20th, 2019, well over 60 days ago. And I did not know of its existence until Friday of last week, when Mr. Mayor was recommending this to be put on our agenda. And in fact, not only was this letter received on June 20th, but there's already been another appeal filed on this letter. So I am deeply disappointed that this was not communicated to us earlier, as this is, in my opinion, and I think the town's opinion, a pretty high-profile project. And this all has to do with the rebuild of Penfield Pavilion and the FEMA reimbursement and the significant, quite frankly, brain damage that was done by Mr. Mayor, the building committee for this, some members of DPW for this, as well as members of the various town bodies to get this done. So I'm disappointed that we're finding out about this well after the fact once again. Mr. Mayor, why don't you walk us through this, please, and what it means to us?
Yeah,
By the way, what it means to us is $4 million that we're not
Right.
getting right now.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think it should at least be noted that this is the first regular meeting since the notice was received, so this is the first meeting to present it.
It should also be noted that we all have email.
Yeah, I'm aware.
And we all check our email repeatedly and ask that we be updated on this.
Anyway, so.
And by the way, my understanding is the Board of Selectmen does not know this either. Is that correct? Has this been presented to the Board of Selectmen? No. And how many meetings have you guys had between? Between June 20th and now? Okay, so
Yeah.
they weren't aware.
Yeah,
either.
I'm just talking about,
Yeah, I understand.
yeah, okay. So as you stated, we received a defunding notice in November of 18. We filed the appeal in January of 19. The appeal went to the state. They strongly supported our position. The state then forwards it to FEMA regional office, and the regional office sent the rejection of the appeal. The date you stated, I think, June 20th. We were not, obviously we're disappointed, but not surprised, because the appeal goes to the regional office that defunded initially. So, since it's reviewed by the defunding office, you kind of expect to get a denial. The second appeal, which we just filed, goes again to the state, then from the state to passes through the region to go to the feds, the national office. We anticipate and hope for a more positive outcome in that regard. The preparation of the second appeal benefited from the rejection, because the rejection was very clear. It stated four specific issues as to why the appeal was denied. Having privy to this information allowed us to focus our attention and to write a much stronger and more refined appeal.
Can you step us through those 4 items, please, just so that we're all on the same page?
Yes, I am going to do that.
Thank you, sir.
And just finishing the timeline before we do that. So the appeal was filed 2 weeks ago. The state has 60 days, and then, like I said, there's another 60 days, and then there's we filed it. The state has 60 days, and then there's another 90 days that it can go through the feds. So 90 days from 150 days from June 20th, we should have a final answer.
Is this our last appeal? Is this
It's our last appeal other than the courts.
Okay, go ahead.
There was four basic denial issues. I'm going to go through 1 through 4. The first one, that the town was approved for a replacement, and instead of a replacement, did a repair. If you're going to change your scope of work, you have to ask for permission to change your scope of work. Their position is, because we moved the one section of the building and then moved it back, it wasn't a replacement, it was a repair. The town's position, it was a change in methodology, not in change in scope. Half the building was demolished, half the building was moved and then moved back. And we did send them, the town did send a request in, and it took them 2.5 years to respond. So if we waited the response, the building would still be under construction, I guess. The second denial action was that we completed the building prior, we took our actions prior to the time FEMA had time to complete a required environmental analysis. Our position here is that environmental evaluation was not required because the building was built on the same footprint for the very same function as the prior construction. Additionally, there was a categorical exclusion in FEMA's first works sheet that said no environmental analysis would be required. Their response to the categorical exclusion was that the rules changed between the time they issued that and the time the building was completed. Our response to that is, well, categorical exclusion aside, there's a statutory exclusion because it's the same function and the same footprint. The third reason is that the supporting horizontal grade beam is located above the natural grade and below the base flood elevation. Basically, FEMA has made its determination of what the natural grade is, relying on non-engineers. They think it's 8.5 feet. Our engineers have told the town it was 10, I think 10.5, 11 feet. So we don't believe that we are above the natural grade, that the horizontal beam is above the natural grade. And also, there's enough clearance between the grade beam and the building, so the grade beam doesn't act as an obstruction for any water flow. And then finally, they denied it on the fourth reason, is the town failed to obtain a consistency determination from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And our response there is that DEEP has stated that they don't have the jurisdiction to provide a consistency determination.
What is that consistency determination?
That we have met the requirements of national NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program.
And we're saying we don't need to hit those requirements?
Well, DEEP, no, we're not saying, we don't mean, DEEP is saying that they don't have the jurisdiction to provide a consistency determination. So they're asking for something that DEEP, at this point, has said they don't have the jurisdiction to provide. So we are, so right now, the the appeal is in the state's hands. We're working to have meetings with DEEP, with Demis, and because the state is now working on their response to the denial as well. So we're trying to work together, see what they can do to help us to help somehow mitigate that fourth denial reason, and that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Questions? We'll go to Ms. Zesma, and then we'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Bob. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but on number 4, is that determined state by state what DEEP has jurisdiction over? In other words, maybe this is a boilerplate rejection, but it's not based on our state laws or our state system.
The denial quotes part of the some act that says that the state should provide what they're asking the state to provide. The state provided a letter 2.5 months ago, saying that they didn't have the jurisdiction. Since this last few weeks in August, when we were trying to set up a meeting with the state, the principal players have been on vacation, so we haven't had a chance to meet with them.
Okay, it's just a pretty obvious error on their part to not know that.
On whose part?
On FEMA's part. I
FEMA's
mean,
part.
asking for something that can't be obtained. My second question is, we heard, I think in January, that there was an 80 some odd, usually percent, recovery, overturning a denial or gaining approval on rejections like this. Do I remember that correctly?
I do remember Mr. Riley was presented at that time and said that his office had a very strong appeal.
That was his
overturned.
office,
His
yeah.
office. And so we worked with them again to submit the second appeal. I think he also stated at that meeting, actually, that would be at the second round, that the first round was not likely
Okay, thank you.
to prevail.
Just on that.
On that specific one, then we'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Yeah, because when I was preparing for the meeting, I looked at the minutes, and the minutes reflect that Mr. Riley said FEMA appeals are not uncommon, and that many applicants receive disapprovals. He said if the town does not have success with the first step, it should have success on the second appeal at the national level. So we're at the second appeal now at the national level.
We got
Correct.
one bullet left in the chamber.
John, in those minutes,
Exactly.
did he give a percentage?
Doesn't seem like it says a percentage here.
Okay.
Let's go to Mr. DeWitt.
Yeah, that was actually at our
February meeting.
February 5th meeting. I know, I was going to look that up. I was just going to ask, do we still have that gentleman under contract, our FEMA advisor?
He is. We still have the firm. That specific person is no longer with the company.
Mr. Walsh, I think you had.
All right. This FEMA letter is quite something. I mean, I don't handle this type of law, but, I mean, they put a lot of effort into this thing. They also mentioned something in there about low-quality fill.
I saw this.
Where did that low-quality fill come from? Do we know? Mr. Mayor?
I do not.
Have you asked the question?
I have not.
Can we ask the question, please, and get an answer to that, whether it came from our fill pile? Because he went out of his way to state that it was a low-quality fill.
And this was, by the way, before all the news broke about our.
Oh, yeah, this was a long time ago.
June.
That was the original denial.
Yeah, there's a,
So,
it also goes on because FEMA would need to further evaluate the purpose of the quantities of fill that were deposited at the project site. Technical bulletin number 5 makes clear that all fill is prohibited unless it is for landscaping, drainage around buildings, support of parking slabs, pool decks, patios, walkways. In this case, it appears that the fill was not placed for these purposes, but rather to serve as a flood control measure to protect landward properties against flooding, something which is prohibited in the V zone.
Right. That we disagree with that.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Walsh. I was just.
no, I'm just saying, I'm like,
I mean, when I say we, obviously we're depending upon our
No.
engineers.
I think,
Right.
I think both are well-written. I will say that if we lose this appeal, it seems as though if the FEMA thing says we were supposed to kind of know a lot of this stuff that we're saying we didn't need to know, or because of conditions on the site, we didn't have to follow, correct?
And specifically, you have to tell me
All
what
right.
you.
And in the town's response to the appeal, to appeal it to Washington DC, August 15, 2019, it's signed by, it's on Mr. Tetro's stationery, and it's signed by him. Did he write one word of this, do you know? Other than his name, or sign his name? Or was this prepared by our, I think Mr. Riley was explaining that they had attorneys down at that firm that wrote these appeals.
It was basically the way the process went is under my project management. We had a group of us, which included myself, Emmett Hidson, Stanton, and Mike Tetro, and a gentleman from the state, and Whit O'Brien, and an attorney from Whit O'Brien. And we had discussions weekly. Everybody, we wrote, we drafted, we redrafted, and came up with the final document.
So you all wrote this?
I know some of it is mine, but I can't say what.
Oh, okay.
ended up getting.
All right, I thought, I was under the understanding from
most
our
of it-
last,
But the final document, if you're, in other words, some of the, Whittle Bryan was the main person who collected the thoughts, put it together and formatted it.
Mhm.
And then I might see something that I disagreed with or thought should be different, so I would suggest language changes and difference, and those would sometimes be changed.
okay. Bob, could you provide us any type of invoices that you might have? You know of no invoices that the town paid for fill from Julian Enterprises LLC? You don't know, you have no idea whether we bought
You
a
mean
spoonful
on
of
this
fill?
project?
On this project?
No, I don't, I have not seen any, I don't want to even speak to that. I've looked at a lot of invoices, and I don't want to, but I don't. I wasn't-
Okay. Could you provide us any and all invoices from Julian Enterprises LLC that have anything to do with this project? If any.
Yes.
Is this on the list? I thought I read the parking lot is on the list to be tested, right? At Penfield?
Yeah, there was a note.
Yeah, the parking lot was, okay, when you're not talking about the fill underneath the building. I think there was definitely fill on the parking lot.
And has that already come back?
Julianville?
Yes. Has that already come back?
I don't know.
Can we check both the parking lot as well as in and around the building,
Right.
please? I don't know whether it's that differentiated in the invoices or not, whether they say it's for the parking lot or for the actual building itself, but we should look down there.
Yeah, I'm thinking for the parking lot, yes. The building, I'm thinking no, but I don't know.
I have no idea on the building. I believe that the parking lot at Penfield was one of those areas that was needed to be tested, and I don't remember hearing that testing has come back yet. Right, but I might be mistaken.
Can you correct my memory? Was Whit O'Brien involved with this whole Penfield project and the FEMA grants from the start?
Yeah, the original FEMA grant was going to give us $250,000.
Mm-hmm.
The written grant, the original determination.
Okay.
And Whit was very involved in getting that adjusted to the $4 million determination.
Was this after the building was built or before? Or I guess it was based on the
It was
damage that was
before.
caused?
Pardon?
Based on the damage that was done?
Correct. Basically, the key issue there was to get it certified as a replacement rather than a repair. And you have to have the cost of the building repair has to be more than 50% of the cost of replacement. Then you can be designated for qualifying for replacement funding. We came in at 53% when we finally worked the numbers.
Okay. And we never, am I reading this correctly, that we didn't get approval from them regarding moving part of the building into the parking lot and then back up again? So they considered it to be a repair, not a replacement?
That's what they're saying, yes. They're saying that by using that material, in other words, by getting up, moving back, that makes it a repair, not a replacement.
Okay.
Our position has been, the town's position has been that that was just salvage material, and it was moved, it was put back, that it's still a replacement.
And why did it take them so long to find out about this change when we all knew about it?
Well, no, we sent them the information before we did it.
Okay.
They just didn't respond for 2.5 years.
Okay, so they just didn't respond. They had it sitting in their file, and they didn't approve it or disapprove it
Correct,
until after we had completely completed the project.
correct.
Well, the
Okay.
building committee made
Go ahead,
if I remember, the building committee made a recommendation based on the fact that they had submitted the data and had not received a response on that one fact.
Yeah, I remember one building committee when Okay, I'm going to back up a little. Well, I'm going to go backwards and forwards. When that I spoke at, I didn't go to many of the building committee meetings, but I went to a couple of them that I was asked to go to. When I informed them that the easiest way to do this thing was just to tear it all down and
Right.
build it up from scratch. All right. They decided not to do that because it would take longer to do it, and because it costs more. The FEMA regs allow you to change, once you get approval for replacement, then you're supposed to do whatever you can do to save, to save on the cost of the project. So our position has been, we did this to save on the cost of the project, and we think that it's still a replacement because the building was the building was completely either demolished or totally removed from the site, a portion of it, and then part of it totally built from new, and part of it put back on the site. So that's been our
And I also
argument.
remember that one of the points was that because the structure underneath the building, the support structure was completely new. That
Yes.
was one of the things, that this is why this is not a repair. This is a full replacement.
right.
I mean, they came before us and told us that our building.
Anybody else? All right, please keep us updated on this. And
Will do.
yes, Mr. Bateson. Ex officio, Selectman
Yeah,
Bates.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to chime in. My level of frustration from last week's meeting and then finding out about this, and thanks to you for bringing this up. We left this issue whenever we went through the first round, or when this happened, and we were adamantly clear to everyone that we need to be updated on what's going on with this stuff. If I recall correctly, we found out about the first denial through, I believe it was the Flood and Erosion Board. We didn't even find out from the administration. So here we are, and everyone was admonished at that time to say, keep us up to date. And then here we are again, we find out we get denied, and we have filed an appeal, unbeknownst to us. Honestly, guys, I find that infuriating. And Bob, fair criticism, I'm disappointed. All this could have been was a phone call. We got denied, we're working on an appeal. That's it.
I understand
It's
what you're
problematic
saying.
that people are scared, or there's something wrong here. That people are not making these phone calls and keeping boards and commissions apprised of what's going on. It really is problematic.
Well, I don't think it's my responsibility to inform the Board of Selectmen. I think that responsibility lies elsewhere. But with respect to this board, it definitely is my responsibility. But there was no meetings. I just didn't send.
I'm just
out an
saying, that was my point. And also, too, I read these documents. That document was expensive. Okay, so I think, if you guys want to get into it, and I don't even know who's paying for this, whether we're accruing more onto the,
I think last time we asked, it was through the project itself. was
yeah,
paying
but these,
Correct.
yeah, so I think you guys maybe should take a look and ask Bob to put together a schedule of where we are to date on this, because I know you did it last time, but take another visit at that document, because these are expensive individuals.
Thank you.
Do you meet, I'm sorry.
Mrs.
Can I just
Leclerc.
clarify? Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'll go ahead.